Murderers come in many shapes and sizes, and as it turns out, some of those sizes happen to be very small and young. Yes, as terrifying as it sounds, many children have taken lives before, some by accident and others on purpose. So join us as we count 10 of the youngest murderers in the world.
Number 10.
Alyssa Bustamante. On October 21st, 2009, 15-year-old Alyssa Bustamante strangled a 9-year-old girl, stabbed her and buried her in a shallow grave. She then wrote in her diary that the experience was enjoyable. It gets worse though. She actually listed killing people as one of her hobbies on her YouTube page. Her prosecutors argued for life imprisonment plus 71 years, accounting for the years lost by her victim. Alyssa pleaded guilty in 2012 to second-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole.
Number 9.
Graham Young. Graham Young was only 14 years old at the time of his first murder. In 1961, he decided to poison his stepmother. He did this by slipping a rare poison into her teacup. She became ill and died only a few months later. Young's aunt turned him into the police, after which a mental examination followed, which resulted in him being diagnosed as a schizophrenic, among other disorders. He was sent off to the Broadmoor Hospital, seeking rehabilitation. However, during his stay there, he discovered even more knowledge about toxic poisons and eventually killed another person. He killed one more person and poisoned at least another 70 before his death at age 42 in his cell at Parkhurst Prison. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't have been drinking or eating anything near this man.
Number 8.
Barry Lukatis. Barry Lukatis was only 14 years old in 1996 when he used a firearm to take the lives of his algebra teacher as well as 2 classmates at a school in Moses Lake. He wore a trench coat and entered the school with 2 concealed pistols, 78 rounds of ammunition and a high-powered rifle. After shooting his victims, he also took hostages, which he released after a brief period. He was diagnosed with clinical depression and was taking the prescribed drug Ritalin to deal with his hyperactivity. He is currently serving 2 mandatory life sentences and an additional 205 years in prison, so I think there's a good chance he's never getting out.
Number 7.
Joshua Phillips. Another 14-year-old on our list, Joshua Phillips murdered 8-year-old Maddie Collins in 1998 in Jacksonville, Florida. He beat her head with a baseball bat, stabbed her twice in the throat, and stuffed her under his waterbed, where she remained for 1 week until discovered by Phillips' mother. He told the authorities that he had panicked after he hit a baseball that struck her in the head as they were playing earlier. Phillips was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. He is now 30 years old and remains incarcerated in Hardy Correctional Institution in Florida.
Number 6.
Lionel Tate. Lionel Tate became the youngest American ever sentenced to life without parole. He was only 12 years old in 1999 when he stomped a 6-year-old girl to death in Broad Country, Florida. Apparently, he was practicing moves that he had seen performed on television by his favorite wrestler, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. His mother described the act as an accidental tragedy. His 2001 conviction was overturned in 2004, and Tate was set free. Unfortunately for him, this didn't last long, as in 2008 he pleaded no contest to the robbery of a pizza delivery man and was sentenced to 10 years in prison.
Number 5.
Andrew Golden and Mitchell Johnson. This pair of Arkansas middle school students went on a shooting spree at their school in 1998, killing 4 female students and a teacher. Golden was 11 years old and Johnson was 13 at the time of the massacre, which also injured another 10 people. The boys went on to become 2 of the youngest Americans to face charges for multiple murder and manslaughter. They were both released on their 21st birthdays. Golden has remained a free man, while Johnson was sentenced to another 12 years in prison due to theft.
Number 4.
Mary Bell. I've actually included Mary Bell in another one of my lists, but being only 10 years old at the time of her first murder, she certainly qualifies for this list too. Mary Bell murdered a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old boy, only 2 months apart in 1968 in England. She did it purely for the joy of killing, she told the police. Mary spent the next 12 years in prison before being released at the age of 23. She now has 1 daughter and a grandchild.
Number 3.
John Venables and Robert Thompson. These cold-blooded killers were only 10 years old at the time they abducted and mutilated 2-year-old James Bulger in February 1993 in England. They kidnapped him from a shopping centre, tortured him and left him on a rail line more than 2 miles away, where the authorities found his body 2 days later. The abduction and various other crimes committed by the duo was caught on surveillance cameras. The pair were convicted in November 1993 and were both released from prison in 2001 and were granted new identities. Since then, John Venables has committed multiple crimes including child pornography.
Number 2.
Amarjit Sada. This 8-year-old from India was convicted in 2007 of the murder of 3 infants, including his sister and cousin, who were both younger than 1 year old. He crushed 2 of the girls and strangled 1, and what's even worse is that his family helped him to cover up 2 of the murders. Sada told authorities, "I took her a little away and killed her with a stone and buried her." Indian law states that he cannot be charged with murder until he is 18, and therefore he is being detained in a children's home until this time.
Number 1.
Carl Newton Mahan. Carl Newton Mahan was 6 years old when he killed his friend Cecil Van Hoos, 8, over a piece of scrap iron on May 18, 1929 in eastern Kentucky. Since times were tough, the 2 boys were out looking for scrap metal to sell to a junk dealer for money. They began fighting over a piece of scrap iron, and Cecil hit Carl in the face with it. Carl ran all the way home with Cecil in tow. He grabbed his father's shotgun and threatened to shoot Cecil, and he did. Carl went to trial for the murder of Van Hoos. The original sentencing was 15 years in reform school, but it was later turned over and the judge issued a writ of prohibition that kept him from going to reform school. At that time, Carl was the youngest murder defendant in the state of Kentucky and possibly in the country.